Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're exploring something many of us carry, often quietly, maybe without even fully realizing it. We're talking about guilt.
hmm
But specifically, we're looking at its impact on mental health, particularly when it's tangled up with childhood experiences.
Yeah. And we've been digging into a lot of material, various notes and insights, all focused on lifting that weight of guilt, especially when it connects back to trauma.
Right. So our mission here is to really unpack how guilt shapes us.
Exactly. We want to get clear on the difference between, let's say, helpful guilt and the kind that just burdens us.
Toxic kind.
The toxic kind, yeah. Understand where it comes from, especially in relation to trauma. And importantly, look at some, practical ways to maybe start letting go.
And I think what makes this so compelling and why we wanted to do this deep dive is that this toxic guilt,
Right.
it's sneaky, isn't it?
Very.
It doesn't always feel like straightforward guilt. Sometimes it shows up as, well, shame or maybe just constant anxiety or even feeling completely wiped out, exhausted. And the notes really highlight how, when it's rooted in trauma, it can feel less like a feeling you have and more like part who you are, like it's baked into your identity.
Ooh, yeah. Okay, so let's start unpacking that.
Let's do it. So, first off, what is guilt at its core?
Right, the basics.
It's actually a natural social emotion. Think of it like an internal compass, sort of guiding us in our interactions.
Okay.
Its purpose, really, is to help us notice when maybe our actions have caused harm or crossed a line, gone against our values.
Mm.
Ideally, it pushes us towards accountability, towards repair.
Making things right, learning from it.
Precisely. Learning, growing, mending connections.
Okay, but then there's the split. The insights we looked at draw a really sharp line between what they call healthy guilt and toxic guilt.
A crucial distinction. Healthy guilt is usually tied to a specific action, something you did or maybe didn't do.
Yes, concrete. And the feeling is generally proportional to that action. It motivates you to, apologize, make amends, change your behavior next time. It connects to empathy, understanding how you affected someone else.
So healthy guilt kind of says, okay, you messed up there, but you're still a decent person. You're still worthy.
Exactly that. It separates the action from the self. Now, toxic guilt, it's the opposite in almost every way.
So,
It's usually not specific, it's global, it's vague. It's not about doing wrong, it feels like being wrong, fundamentally. It's this constant, heavy, overwhelming sense of just badness. And instead of motivating repair, it just fuels self-blame, shame, feeling inadequate.
So it feels excessive, like way out of proportion.
Totally excessive, utterly exhausting. And it's driven less by empathy and more by fear of judgment, fear of not being good enough, fear of being rejected.
So it doesn't guide you, it just attacks you, attacks your sense of worth.
That's a great way to put it. It attacks your core self-worth. Its underlying message isn't you did something bad, it's you are bad.
And that's where it gets tangled up with shame, right? That difference between I did something wrong, guilt, and I am wrong, shame. Toxic guilt seems to bridge that gap in the worst way.
It absolutely blurs that line. It makes you feel like any mistake is just further proof of your inherent badness. And this is where the connection to childhood trauma becomes so critical and, frankly, quite painful.
Yeah, let's get into that. How does trauma actually rewire this whole guilt system?
Well, you have to think about it from a child's perspective. Young children, they don't have the cognitive tools to understand really complex adult situations or systemic problems.
Right, they're naturally egocentric at that stage.
Exactly. So if a caregiver is struggling maybe with addiction, mental health, maybe they're just inconsistent, emotionally unavailable, or the home is chaotic, full of conflict.
The child can't see the bigger picture.
No, they don't think, oh, mom or dad is overwhelmed, or this environment is unstable for these external reasons. Their developing brain tries to make sense of the chaos, the fear, the unpredictability.
And the easiest explanation points inward.
It points inward. This must be my fault. It's an attempt, often unconscious, to find some sense of control or understanding in a world that feels out of control.
Wow. And that conclusion, it must be my fault, plants the seed, this core belief.
That can last a lifetime. If I feel bad, or if bad things are happening, it must be because I am bad.
That's heartbreaking.
It is. And it's especially common in homes with, emotional neglect, really inconsistent affection, parental substance abuse, high conflict, maybe threats of abandonment.
Situations where the child feels fundamentally unsafe.
Fundamentally unsafe, yes. And they can't leave. So paradoxically, taking on the guilt can feel like a survival strategy.
How does that work? How is feeling guilty adaptive?
The child might unconsciously reason, if it's my fault, maybe I can fix it, or if I just become perfect, if I'm really good, really quiet, anticipate their needs, maybe then they won't be angry, maybe then I'll be safe, maybe then I'll be loved.
So taking responsibility, even when it's not theirs, feels safer than acknowledging the caregiver or situation is unreliable.
Precisely. It offers a false sense of agency.
The material also mentioned parentification. That's when a child is sort of pushed into a caregiving role too early.
Yes, exactly. Taking care of parents' emotional needs, managing siblings, taking on household responsibilities way beyond their age, having to suppress their own needs to keep the peace.
That sounds like it would directly wire you to feel responsible for everyone else's happiness.
Absolutely. You're conditioned, deeply conditioned, to believe that other people's feelings and well-being are your job, your responsibility.
So then naturally, anytime someone is unhappy or something goes wrong,
It triggers that internal alarm.
yeah,
I failed. I failed them. Again. Even if it was completely impossible, completely outside your control. It feel like a personal failing because you were taught it was your burden to carry.
and it's so important, like you said, to realize that this wasn't the child's failure.
Not at all. It was the situation's failure, the system's failure.
Okay, so this leads to certain behaviors, right? Things that might have helped the child survive then, but cause problems later, like fawning, people-pleasing.
Yes. And the material we reviewed framed these really powerfully, not as flaws, but as brilliant adaptations.
Brilliant adaptations. I like that.
It reframes them completely. Things like fawning, quickly agreeing, smoothing things over, trying to appease potential anger, or people-pleasing, saying yes when every part of you screams no, sacrificing your own needs, or over-apologizing, constantly saying sorry, feeling like you're taking up too much space just by existing.
These weren't signs of weakness back then.
Not in the slightest. They were survival skills. Strategies developed to navigate an unpredictable or unsafe environment, to minimize harm, to try and get core needs met like safety and connection. You did what you had to do.
But carrying those strategies and that underlying toxic guilt into adulthood, that's where the cost really adds up.
Immensely.
Yeah.
Because chronic toxic guilt becomes fertile ground for some serious mental health struggles.
Like anxiety.
Definitely anxiety. That constant fear of messing up, saying the wrong thing, being judged. The hypervigilance we talked about, always scanning faces, reading into tones, looking for disapproval. That's often guilt-fueled anxiety.
And depression, too, I imagine.
Oh, absolutely. That deep sense of worthlessness, the self-hatred, the hopelessness that comes from believing, I am bad, I am the problem. That's a direct line to depression for many people.
And maybe obsessive thoughts, like replaying conversations or situations.
Yes, getting stuck in loops, replaying interactions, questioning everything. Did I handle that right? Did they seem upset? What did I do wrong? It's mental torture, really.
And this isn't just in the mind, is it? You mentioned the nervous system gets stuck.
Completely. Toxic guilt essentially signals danger to the nervous system. So it keeps you trapped in a survival state. That might be hyperarousal, feeling wired, anxious, on edge all the time.
Fight or flight.
Fight or flight, exactly. Or it could be the opposite collapse, the freeze response, feeling numb, exhausted, shut down, that sense of just giving up. That's often linked to depression.
So it really rewires not just how you feel about things, but your whole sense of self, your identity.
That's the crux of it. It shifts you from, I made a mistake, to, I am the mistake. It convinces you that your core self is flawed.
And that shows up in life. How?
Oh, in so many ways. Feeling undeserving of good things, happiness, success, love, maybe subtly sabotaging opportunities, feeling like you constantly have to overfunction, work twice as hard just to be acceptable, chronic self-doubt, even when evidence points to the contrary. It's just deeply draining.
You mentioned the nervous system interpreting guilt as a threat to social safety. Can you expand on that link to fight, flight, freeze, fawn?
Yeah, for a child, connection to a caregiver is survival. Rejection or abandonment feels life-threatening.
Yeah.
So when that deep toxic guilt gets triggered later in life, the nervous system often defaults to those old survival patterns.
So feeling intense guilt might make someone lash out defensively. That's fight.
Right, or avoid situations or feelings, that's flight. Or just shut down, feel paralyzed, that's freeze.
Or double down on people-pleasing. Trying desperately to fix it and get back in good graces, that's fawn.
Exactly. And seeing these as nervous system responses, as attempts to find safety based on past programming, is so much more helpful than just judging ourselves for reacting that way. It's not a character flaw, it's physiology shaped by experience.
And a huge part of this internal experience is often that relentless inner critic.
Oh, the inner critic, yes. It's like the voice of toxic guilt constantly whispering or sometimes shouting those undermining messages.
Like what does it typically sound like?
Things like, you should have known better. You always mess things up. It's all your fault. You're not good enough. You'll never get it right. Often it even echoes the voice of a critical parent or figure from the past.
And it feels so real, so true.
It does. It can feel like the absolute truth about who you are. But a key insight from the material is this. You are not the critic. You are the awareness listening to the critic. You're the part noticing the pain it causes. And hopefully, you're the part that wants to heal.
Okay, so that's the crucial pivot point, healing. How do we even begin to address something this deep-seated? How do we start rewriting that story?
It often starts with gentle reflection. Not beating yourself up more, but getting curious.
Asking questions.
Yeah, questions like, when does this guilt feel strongest? What situations trigger it? Whose voice does that inner critic actually sound like? Was guilt used to control me when I was younger? What would it really mean to forgive myself? What do I need to feel worthy, separate from what others think?
And the advice to do this gently, right? Slowly.
Very gently, like you're approaching a wounded part of yourself. The goal isn't to argue the guilt away intellectually, but to allow understanding and compassion to soften its grip over time. Writing things down can be helpful too.
And therapy can obviously play a huge role here. What kind of approaches are helpful?
Several are really relevant. CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, is good for identifying and challenging those distorted, guilt-inducing thought patterns, like automatically assuming responsibility for things that aren't yours. Then there's IFS, internal family systems. It helps you understand the part of you that carries the guilt, have compassion for it, and see its original protective intention, even if it's causing harm now.
Learning to talk to that part, almost?
Exactly. And compassion-focused therapy is explicitly designed to build up that kind, supportive inner voice to counter the harsh critic. And crucially, if trauma is a significant part of the picture, trauma-informed therapy is essential, because you often need to work directly with regulating the nervous system before you can safely process the underlying experiences fueling the guilt.
That makes sense. And the material really hammered home the body's role, saying guilt lives in the body. So somatic, body-based practices are important.
Absolutely vital. Because as we discussed, this isn't just a thinking problem. It's held in the nervous system, in the tissues. So working with the body is key to release.
What kind of practices are we talking about?
Often very simple things. Gentle shaking or trembling can help discharge that pent-up survival energy. The butterfly hug, crossing arms, tapping shoulders gently can be very self-soothing and grounding. Grounding practices themselves, feeling your feet on the floor, noticing the support beneath you, maybe walking barefoot outside if possible, telling yourself, I'm here, I'm safe now. These bring you back to the present moment, out of the past threat response.
And breath work.
Yes, simple breath work. Focusing on slowing the breath, maybe making the exhale a little longer than the inhale. This directly calms the nervous system. The goal of all these is to release physical tension and shift your body's state from threat back towards safety and calm.
And then there's self-forgiveness, which sounds big.
It is big. And the material rightly frames it as a practice, not a one-off decision.
Not like flipping a switch.
Definitely not. It's a process. It involves acknowledging harm you might have caused, yes, but without getting stuck in that toxic shame spiral. It might involve making amends, but only where it's truly appropriate and needed, not out of excessive, misplaced guilt. And fundamentally, it's about allowing yourself to be human, recognizing you did the best you could with what you knew and had back then, acknowledging your growth. It's like turning towards that wounded part of yourself and saying, I see you, I see your pain, I see how hard you tried, and I'm not going to abandon you anymore.
That's powerful. An act of self-compassion.
Deep self-compassion. It's about ending the internal war.
Okay, so let's try and synthesize this. Pulling the threads from this deep dive together, what's the main takeaway?
I think the core message is that while healthy guilt can be a guide, toxic guilt is a tyrant. It steals your peace, your energy, your sense of worth.
And that you're not bad or broken if you carry it.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
You are someone who adapted, often brilliantly, to painful or difficult circumstances, especially in childhood. You learned to carry a weight that likely was never yours to begin with.
And part of healing is learning to distinguish really clearly between I did something wrong and I am wrong. Recognizing when toxic guilt is lying to you.
Exactly. Which also helps explain some common struggles, like why setting boundaries feels so hard and guilt-inducing for some people.
Right, because you were conditioned to put others first. But boundaries aren't selfish.
They're necessary for health.
Yeah.
And also clarifying that healthy guilt is okay. We're not trying to get rid of all guilt, just the toxic, shame-based kind.
And a practical tip that came up was about over-apologizing. Instead of, I'm sorry for existing, maybe trying, thank you for your patience or thank you for understanding.
Yes, shifting the language can subtly shift the internal state. And always remembering that body connection guilt is stored physically, it does impact the nervous system, so somatic work is often part of the path.
So ultimately, this whole deep dive points towards choosing compassion over self-condemnation.
Learning to recognize when that old toxic guilt is running the show, guilt that belongs to the past or was never truly yours, and beginning the practice of gently setting it down.
It really comes down to challenging that core message.
It does. If toxic guilt has spent years telling you you were the mistake, the healing journey involves asking, what would it look like, just for today, maybe just for this moment, to tell yourself instead, I am worthy of peace?
A powerful question to end on. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.